So this is Tuesday, May 6th, and we're going to continue our lecture on Chapter 38. A couple of announcements, and these are important. What you got from me for homework for today, in addition to creating those outlines, I gave you supplementary materials that I think will help you craft those outlines. One of the FREs in the packet that I gave you is on the Great Awakenings. Talk about the differences between the Great Awakenings. I think, what number is that on your, does anyone have their, number 6? So it looks like this. What I did is I printed out the Wikipedia, just the summaries that explain them. This is the basic explanation between the differences in the time periods. You could do a little more research in both your textbook or online to give you a little bit more background information. I fully realize that the Great Awakenings are something we didn't spend a ton of time on. In all likelihood, you're not going to see an FRE on the Great Awakenings. However, it is a possibility. It did come up one year where it said analyze religious movements throughout the 19th and 20th centuries. And I mean, that's a tough one. Normally, you would stray away from it, and you would choose the other one. But just in case, I want to expose you to it. You will see a multiple choice question or two on some type of religious movement, absolutely for sure. So I want you to familiarize yourself with it. The other piece of paper I gave to you tonight is on the Dixiecrats. They come. It's a short-lived third party that makes its appearance in the election of 1948, and we're going to talk about what reaction why they come about, and a little bit about them today. But I want you to have a little bit of background. It's not the full thing, but you can read about it. And one of your FREs, I don't remember which one, it says talk about the role of third parties, and it gives you the Populist Party, the Progressive Party, or the Bull Moose Party, and the Dixiecrats. It says choose two. I'm assuming you're not going to choose the Dixiecrat, but please read a little bit about them because you could see a multiple choice question on the Dixiecrat Party. Okay? Are we good on that? That's all I wanted to say. As far as the outlines go, this is also important. I had a couple people bring their outlines to me this morning and say, hey, Mr. Epler, how does this outline look? I want you to keep a couple things in mind. You do not, number one, you do not have to do these outlines. Do we know that? You don't have to. They're optional. You can come in on Monday and have none of that packet done, and that's fine. If you are totally burned out this week and you don't get to it, I get it. But if you do these outlines, that's going to help you on Monday when we write 2 FREs. The outlines themselves, the first one I saw this morning was word vomit. It was like every fact that they could possibly think, name, date type thing that they threw on the paper, and it was like bullet points. It wasn't full sentences, but it was just like a mess of facts, information that they wanted to include it was the FRE that's, analyzed to what extent America remained isolationists between 1789 and 1900, I think it was, something like that. Is that the time period? What? Okay, so 1940. That's a huge time period. Here's the thing: the real challenge isn't going to be to get a ton of evidence. I think you guys will have some evidence, and yes, you could put some evidence. Like you could do evidence on here and do a little bit of it, bullet points of evidence or whatever it's going to be. The real challenge when you're writing 2 FREs, and this is going to be the case when you take the AP test on following Wednesday, is organization. It's a time thing, right? You only have 30 minutes to write your FREs. You want to stay on track, and you want to answer the question. So with these types of things, I would recommend setting your outlines up like this. Intro. What's the main argument I'm going to make, right? So if we're talking about that isolationist one, I might say one sentence, America failed to remain isolationist during that time period. Or at times America tried to adhere to a policy of isolation or isolationism, but it was pulled into world affairs on several occasions. So that's my main argument. You write your one main argument. And then, body paragraph 1, what is the topic I'm going to write about? And then a couple bullet points. 2, what do I want to write about in that? Couple bullet points. 3, what do I want to write about? And a couple bullet points. This will help you get your thoughts down in a cohesive manner when you're scrambling. Trust me, Monday will be a scramble for some of you. Some of you are going to have hand cramping up and things like that. the less time you have to spend thinking, all right, what do I want to write about next? What do I want to write about? If you can have the structure, then you can, that's the time saver. Does that make sense? That's why I've always said this year that planning can be really essential. Some of you do this really well. Some of you just like, yep, I know what I want to write. I know how to make it flow. Others of you get all over the place. And you've done this before when you said, yeah, I ran out of time, or yeah, I didn't quite get what I wanted down. So this is the framework that I think would be helpful for these outlines. Yeah, Connor.
Are we supposed to be writing 5-paragraph essays?
What do you, 5-paragraph essays? You could do it in 5 paragraphs. You absolutely don't have to. You could do like
the order was like how we make it.
It doesn't have to be like that. So it's just whatever works best for you to answer the question. More than anything, you must answer the question. Another person was asking me this morning, do we want to do I have to follow chronologically? So you know how one of the essays is how did women's what's the question? How did women's rights? The very last one, number 10. Okay, so how did women's roles change 1865 to 1920? They said, do you want us to tell a narrative of like start in 1865 and work our way all the way up to 1920? You could, but some of you guys get lost doing that. You could also just pick out topics. So if I'm doing how women's roles have changed, right? If I were doing this is just how I write. I wouldn't do a narrative. Narratives get me off topic. I would take women's, is it roles? Is that what it is, women's roles? And I would break it down. I would say, okay, let's talk economic. What would I talk about if I'm talking about women's roles economically in America? Yeah, jobs. I would talk about like jobs. All right, let's talk 1865. What was the role of the woman and what job opportunities are there? All right, they could become teachers. They could do some types of work, but for the most part, they are in the house being homemakers. That's their job, is homemakers. Raising children, helping on farms. They also have a big role on farms, pre-industrial America. Then I would talk about political. All right, what did I talk about with politics? Yeah, this is the suffrage movement. And then I chronicle the suffrage movement. Not suffer, suffrage.
What year did they get their
1920. What amendment?
That's 19?
19th Amendment. 19th Amendment. I think 20 amendments is the first direct income tax, I think. It's 19th. So 18th is prohibition, 19th is the women's right to vote. If you remember, women's right to vote always comes just after prohibition. And I chronicle this. And then I go to social, and I talk about like how women's roles were viewed. So even though they might be working more, they're still seen as, inferior to men in a lot of cases. They're still seen as not on equal planes. They're still seen as, taking jobs that are more feminine or more like, more apt to be secretaries or phone operators or things like that. And you talk about how there's still this idea that women's natural place is still in the home. Do you see how so yes, you could just do all of it chronologically and start there. But to me, this breaks it down so I just know what I'm arguing, I get it there, and it's organized, and I say what I want to say. That's just me. Does that help at all?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Again, you will be able to use the outline as long as it's not, like if you bring in something on Monday and it's just like paragraphs, right? You got 3-4 sentences strung together. I don't want that. I won't let you use it. This is not how can I write this at home. This is practicing writing under pressure in a timed manner with an outline. I realize that you have less time. I'm not going to grade these quite as intensely as if I had given you a full time period. I want to see you get it done, move on to the next one, manage your time, and write something coherently. Okay? Is that, you guys got what I'm looking for? Got it online? Good. All right. Now, moving on. What time did we get out of here today? 27. All right. Yesterday, we started talking about, the very last thing we talked about were the 3 major themes of Chapter 38. The 3 major themes of the Eisenhower era. I got a lot of stuff to get through today. Yeah.
Do we only get to 4?
We should get a little further than that. But Carter will probably be where we stop. Maybe not. we'll get into Reagan. We should get into Reagan, but it'll be very brief. But it is brief on the AP test, so just know that. All right, first theme from yesterday. I'm not going to write it on the board, but it was on there yesterday. Is number one theme. This is Eisenhower era. Eisenhower era means what years?
53 to 61.
Yeah. You guys should know these presidents. I told you guys, from Roosevelt, from FDR, it would really help you to know Roosevelt, Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy, Lyndon B. Johnson. Know it up through as far as you can go. Make an acronym or whatever it's going to be. So when we're talking about 53 to 61, right? We're going to talk about Vietnam tomorrow. But three major themes. One is economic prosperity, moderate conservatism at home, and Cold War tensions abroad. That's theme number one. I'm going to say that again. Economic prosperity. We talked about this, the economic boom from basically the end of World War II through the 60s. Economic prosperity, moderate conservatism at home. We're moderately conservative. I'm going to talk about what that looks like today. And Cold War tensions abroad. So we got prosperity and conservatism at home, Cold War tensions abroad. Which one dominates the news? It's Cold War, and we're going to talk about that the most. Theme number two. I did not write this down. Theme number two. Expansion. Someone get the door. Just look at it. Expansion of the middle class, which we've talked about. I'm not going to talk a lot more about. But the next part, the second part of it, which is, I like the way that the text actually says this, the expansion of the middle class, which leads to a blossoming consumer culture. A blossoming consumer culture. This consumer culture is aided by a new invention. TV. TV revolutionizes this time period. I was thinking about it last night. If I had to, and I know I don't normally do this, if I had to take a one shot in the dark on a type of FRE that I've never seen, that I think could come in the next couple of years, it is on TV and radio, the impact of just TV and radio. You talk about radio in the early 1900s, you talk about 1910, 1920, and especially how Eisenhower, who's the first president to use radio as campaigning? No, it wasn't FDR.
Teddy Roosevelt.
Wilson.
No, it's not Teddy Roosevelt. That's FDR or the fireside chats. The first president to really effectively use it in campaigning is Hoover. Is actually Hoover. Is that what he said? Do you guys remember that? So Hoover's the first president to really use it in campaigning. But there are presidents, I can't remember which president's the first one to actually broadcast over the radio. I can't remember. But you talk about how it initially starts in the early 1900s, and by the 1920s, radio is playing an integral part in American society. The radio brings families together from a social standpoint. Remember, families are listening to shows and advertisements. Advertising over the radio becomes a big deal. Yeah.
So in the 50s, did TV start to overtake the radio?
Absolutely, absolutely. And the black and white television becomes a staple in American households by the 1950s and 1960s. By the end of the 1960s, almost every American in the country is going to have a black and white TV by the end of the 1960s. The Vietnam War is going to be the first war actually broadcasted on TV. Huge impacts. I think that would be a great FRE or even a DBQ. I would be so happy with myself if I could pick that out. And I don't want to say that that's going to be it, but I've never seen it before. And it's exactly the type of thing that would be right in the wheelhouse. There's so much you can write because you break it down to political, economic, and social. From a political standpoint, with the TV, we get our first televised debate between presidential candidates in 1960 between Kennedy and Nixon. campaigning goes on the TV. Eisenhower's the first one to start. He like awkwardly embraces TV. Eisenhower does. The first time they use TV with Eisenhower, they record him answering questions in a town hall setting. The questions he answered, no one had even asked. He was sitting in a room by himself, and they cut the TV bit so that the people recorded the questions after he had recorded the answers. And campaigning all of a sudden becomes a big deal on the TV. It becomes a very powerful medium to reach the voters. I think the TV revolutionizes economics as far as advertising goes. Yeah, like brand names, and we're selling everything. It fuels this consumer culture. Socially, the TV is going to create real problematic things for you ladies, right? The TV shows early on, they reinforce this domestic role for women, and you're going to start pushing back against that, women and ladies in the 60s. So anyways, the TV, I could see it happening. I'm not going to say it, but if I had to take one shot in the dark on something, technology might be it, and it would be a good one as far as the radio. So you got to know, 1920s is when the late 1910s and 1920s is when the radio really starts becoming a big part of society, and TV in the 50s and 60s. Yeah.
Well, when was the color TV invented?
I don't know when the color TV was invented. And that actually the TV itself was invented in the late 19-teens or early 1920s, but no one knew about it, and it wasn't like a big deal until the 1950s, okay? It doesn't become a consumer product as much, okay? Third major theme. So this is like big deal stuff, the type of stuff that you would be asked to write FREs or some type of essay on. The emerging civil rights movement and the influence of television. Say it again. The emerging civil rights movement and the influence of television along with popular music, so I put that in parentheses. So the influence of television, parentheses, and popular music began to create rifts within American society. This is this word, rifts. Again, the emerging civil rights movement and the influence of television, along with popular music, begin to create rifts within American society. All right? Mean like separations, divisions in society. Okay? Problematic issues.
So you're talking like rock and roll?
Yeah, we're talking about like Elvis would be popular music. Yeah, the starts of rock and roll. I'll get a list of a couple other musicians for you guys. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but maybe a couple that I could give you. Say, hey, if you have to talk about music in the 1950s, here's a couple bands that you could name drop to be used as evidence. But the big one's Elvis. Elvis was a very poor guy. Did you guys know that Elvis was born in I believe, Mississippi, in what they call a shotgun shack? I think this is hilarious. Shotgun shacks. Anyone ever heard this word before? It's kind of a derogatory, well, it's not derogatory, it's kind of a stereotype term for really, really small, essentially like a trailer home. The reason they call them shotgun shacks is because you go in the front door and the whole thing's set up like a long rectangle, and all the bedrooms branch off this one rectangle. It's got one main hallway. You got the kitchen, and then you go to the living room, and then the bedrooms. It's all, you could shoot a shotgun right through the hallway, and it would never hit anything going through the front door and out the back door. We'll call them shotgun shacks. He was very poor. Got a job as a truck driver, and then got discovered by someone like, hey, you could sing, in his truck singing, and he made it big and had a meteoric rise to fame. So, okay, all right. Point number 2. So here's so this is the major themes. Let's talk about the points. I got several points that I want to make today. First point. Ike takes command. Ike is Eisenhower's nickname. I just want you to have it there because they call him Ike. Dwight D. Eisenhower. Dwight David Eisenhower. Ike takes command. Eisenhower served in World War I. He also served in World War II. He started World War II. He started World War II as a colonel, And by the end, he gets this like great rise in the military. He becomes a 5-star general. He's one of only 5 5-star generals in our country's history. So I mean, that's a pretty big deal. He's seen as the perfect guy for the job. He is a military-minded guy that's not a crazy military guy, almost like a compassionate military man. He, after the war, served as the, I think he was the president of Princeton. It was one of the Ivy League schools, I think. Served as president for a couple of years, so he's gotten he's been civilized again after the war. He's seen as a perfect guy to be able to deal with Cold War tensions abroad and bring back some sense of normalcy at home. Does that make sense? Okay. So, Ike takes over. Couple things. In the election, the election of 1952. A few things I want you to know. One is the impact of TV, and we just talked about that. All of a sudden, the TV starts having an impact on the political world. 2, Korea is another big issue at the time. Korea has not ended by this time period in the election of 1952. What year does Korea end? 53, good. Ike promises, he pledges, he will go to Korea himself to get peace terms settled, right? He will go to Korea himself, which he does. He follows through. He actually flies to Korea. Although he's not successful initially, he winds up threatening to use nukes on North Korea and the Chinese troops, and then they quickly sign an armistice, which is going to be violated several times in following years. But technically, we've never signed a peace treaty. It's just an armistice. I've talked about that. So Korea is a big deal. I want you to know that we have 53,000 Americans killed in the Korean War. It's over 50,000 Americans die in Korea. I'm not talking about wounded, die. 53,000 Americans die in Korea. But Korea was still seen as a success. What was our goal in Korea? What's Truman's goal? What's the term? Containment. The goal is containment. Under Truman, it's containment. We're going to talk about how it changes with Eisenhower, but we do contain communism, so it is a success in that sense. I'll call it a minor success, right? Second thing, B, is Eisenhower. Do we know what political party he is? Think about what normally military-minded people are. Yeah, he's a Republican. Eisenhower Republicanism. Republicanism at home. So this is domestic stuff. This is going to be our domestic policies and issues. This is domestic. Eisenhower brands what he wants to do, his stance, his beliefs. He calls it, and this would be a good thing to remember, he calls it dynamic, doesn't that sound nice? Dynamic conservatism. Yeah. Well, it's his policy. It is his platform. He doesn't necessarily run. I don't know if he runs on the slogan of dynamic conservatism, but it's what he tries to do. So yeah, it is his platform. Yes. And there's 2 parts to it. In one part, he kind of fails. The other part, he's a little more mildly successful. Dynamic conservatism is broken into 2 parts. The first part is be liberal with people. Be liberal when dealing with people. With the economy, the government, and people's money. What does he want to be? Yeah, he wants to be conservative. With people's money, be conservative. He wants to balance the budget. So it says, with the economy, government, and people's money, be conservative. With people, be liberal. Be humane. Be human. Although he doesn't, minorities don't enjoy this commitment from Eisenhower, except for in one case with the Little Rock Nine, which we're going to talk about. I think Eisenhower did sympathize with African Americans and their struggle. He recognized there was a problem. He wasn't willing to go to bat for them at that time. That's a big thing to understand. He sympathized with African Americans, but he wasn't willing to go to bat and really tackle the problem head on. He wanted to get America settled, socially settled, before tackling such a big issue. Yeah.
Isn't it Eisenhower who sends in the troops?
He does, and so we're going to talk about that. But that was he sends in troops into Little Rock, Arkansas, to protect those 9 African American children. You guys have heard of this, the Little Rock Nine? But it was because the governor of Arkansas was just a flippant idiot. His name is Orville Faubus, which is a crazy Orville Faubus. What kind of name is that? We'll talk more about him. So he tried to balance the budget. In his 8 years as president, he balances the budget 3 times. So he does have some success. Balanced budget means when the government spends the same amount as it takes in taxes. We don't have a deficit. We're not going into more debt. He's trying to prevent us to go into more debt. Truman, what does he do? What does Truman, the guy before him, do with the military? Do you guys remember? Builds it up, big bucks. Remember that huge military buildup? We're building up the military. Truman says, let's spend money effectively, more effectively. We'll take a look at how he does that. So he ends or puts a brake on the enormous military buildup, and he focuses on one division of the Army, or of the armed services, which is the Air Force, essentially. He ramps up the building of planes, especially planes that can drop nuclear bombs. Yeah, he's gonna say, you know what? It costs a lot of money to outfit soldiers and ration, these guns and food and clothes and all this stuff to maintain a large military or a large army. Let's start focusing on planes. Yeah.
What if you shoot like a plane down with a nuke in it? Does it go off in the plane?
I don't know. That's a good question. If you shoot a plane down with a nuke in it, I don't
Hits the ground.
I think it has to be activated. Yeah, I don't think it's a contact with it's got to be like the uranium's got to. I don't know how it works, but I don't think it necessarily means a nuke goes off if a plane with a nuke goes down. All right, yeah, that would suck. All right, we're going to talk more about this. I'll talk more about this, but let's talk about the social stuff, the liberalist people. So, point C over here is social unrest at the time. I appreciate you guys hanging in there with me. I know this is not the most invigorating, but this is important, huh? All right. We just got to get through it. So, social unrest. The first big thing going on in the United States, number one on people's minds during this time period, for the most part, is going to be the Red Scare. I talked about this yesterday a bit, didn't I? This Red Scare especially ramps up after the Soviets develop and successfully test their atomic bomb. Do we remember what year that was in? Right. 49? Especially after the Soviets test their first nuclear weapon, all of a sudden this Red Scare is ramping up. Also, once China falls to communism, it's feeding into these fears and worries. Examples of the Red Scare. Andy, can you give me one example of a person or a thing? Yeah, Nixon and McCarthy. Joe, can you give me another?
The Hollywood 10.
Yeah, so Hollywood, like list of Hollywood. These types of blacklists of people who are going to be put on the list of communists, supposed communists, and ruins careers. So Hollywood actors would be another example.
Reagan on there?
I
Wasn't one of the times when he was like on the list.
don't know. It might have been. He might have been. I don't know off the top of my head. The question was, it was Reagan on that list. I don't know. Do you got another one? Anyone got another one? We wrote one down yesterday. Yeah. The Rosenbergs, Julius and Ethel Rosenberg are examples. The other piece of evidence, did I talk about the loyalty programs yesterday? Loyalty programs. School teachers taking loyalty oaths, pledging that they will not teach or embrace the ideology of communism. So that's the Red Scare. There was some what I would call substance to these fears. Do you guys know what I mean by that? Some substance to these fears, meaning it was some truth behind it. It was over-exaggerated, though, okay? Some truth behind it. Yes, there were communist sympathizers in the United States. Yes, some even in the government. Yes, there were communist and Soviet spies in the United States, but not nearly as widespread as it makes it out to be. Next thing that's big is and there's a lot of points I want to make about this. This is the big one, is the seeds of the civil rights movement. You guys were supposed to read this. I'm going to give you the chronological order. I'm just going to say it. I'm not going to write everyone down because I think you read this and you should be able to say, oh, yep, I remember reading that. Hopefully you did. If not, you need to go back and reference it. Okay, here's the chronological development of events. And this is all like the underpinnings or the foundations on which the civil rights movement is going to really take hold in the 1960s. The modern civil rights movements really takes hold in the 1960s, but it gets its foundations, its beginnings in the 1950s and late 40s. First one, make sure you get this down, Jackie Robinson. Jackie Robinson becomes the first, what? African-American baseball player in the major leagues.
Is that under the civil rights?
Yep, so this is all civil rights stuff. I'm going to give you 9 points. There's going to be 9 of them. Oh, man, 9. I know. Huh? I think I got 8. That's pretty good, though, wasn't it?
Just a little off.
All right, anyways. So 9. So 1947, Jackie Robinson. Big event. 1948, Truman desegregates, all one word, desegregates the armed forces. Korea is the first war that we have black troops and white troops fighting side by side. Truman desegregates the armed forces. 1948. The African Americans served in the Civil War, but in different regiments. The armed forces were segregated, even through World War I, through World War II. Huh? Oh, nice. My lunch.
Oh, you got 3?
I'll just take it now. Thank you. All right. I'm not going to eat it in front of you. Don't worry. I'm not that kind of guy. So, yeah. Yum. Nom. It's a sub. That's a big deal. And this is, by the way, Southerners, they're not happy about this. So if you read that Dixiecrat Wikipedia page, I mean, you're gonna, this is fueling this tension. Next one, historic, must know, put a star by it, you gotta know. 1954, Brown, B-R-O-W-N, V, period, versus the Board of Education, Board of Ed of Topeka, Kansas. Brown versus the Board of Ed of Topeka, Kansas. Huh? T-O-P-E-K-A. Topeka. Yeah. 1954. And here's what it does. It overturns Plessy versus Ferguson. I'm going to put B, Brown versus Board, 1954, overturns Plessy versus Ferguson. This is the Supreme Court case, which is in 1896. I mean, this is the Supreme Court case that legalizes segregation. It makes segregation legal. You can have, African American hotels and white hotels, and this is the legal basis for segregation in the South. Now we know that it's supposed to be separate but equal. It never was in the South. So don't kid yourselves and try and make that argument that it was. It was not. So this overturns it. Now here's the really important part. You said 17 we get out? 27, good. Here's the really important part. This is a historic Supreme Court case, but it did not immediately desegregate everything. Let me give you a statistic. 10 years later, 10 years after the Brown versus Board of Education decision, 2% of southern schools had desegregated.
Was the North already?
The North was more, border states in the northern states were much more compliant. There was already desegregation in many parts of the North, not everywhere, but in a majority of northern schools. You do have, black schools and white schools in some northern states. Not everywhere, and I don't know these specifics, but I would say in the North there was much less segregation, but it still did exist. So 10 years later, it's really not until the Civil Rights Acts, which we're going to cover Friday, it's really not until the Civil Rights Acts in the late 1960s that this becomes enforced and that we really start getting federal support to enforce these. Like I said, think Eisenhower, even though Eisenhower had nothing to do with this decision, I think he did sympathize with the African American cause, but he wasn't willing to make it a major priority. Does that make sense? Next one, 1955. This is starting to get into stuff that you guys know, but you gotta put it in time in this framework. Rosa Parks, Montgomery bus boycott. Rosa Parks and the Montgomery bus boycott.
1954.
What? 1955.
She starts the bus boycott?
She does. She starts the bus boycott. Now. Oh, I missed the Emmett Till thing. Oh, I gotta throw that in there. So this is in Alabama. This is in Alabama. Basically, you know the story. Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat. She was already a civil rights activist. She worked for a local branch of the NAACP. She knew what she was doing. It was still dangerous. She could have been lynched for such an action. Not legally, but it could have happened. I mean, she was risking her life. I mean, it was a big deal. The bus boycott is not organized by Rosa Parks herself. It is a young African-American pastor in the area who organizes, and that's in town, that organizes the bus boycott by the name of Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. makes his name and appears on the national scene through his organization of the Montgomery bus boycott. Does that make sense? He's only 27 years old at the time.
Did they lose a lot of profit from that boycott?
The bus system? Oh yeah. It was widely successful. African Americans walked, black folks were walking miles a day to avoid taking the buses. It was really, really, really a commitment, and it was, it's a turning point. It is a turning point. Absolutely, yeah.
Wait, did he organize it before or after?
After Rosa Parks does this. So she's in jail, and what happened is there had, in most southern cities, there were laws in place that said, here's the black folks part of the bus and here's the white folks part of the bus. But Montgomery had this extra little, even more offensive clause in the laws there with their bus system that said if a white person, if the bus is full and a white person had to stand, they could ask an African American person to stand up and force them to do so. And Rosa Parks said no. So even if African Americans were in the colored section of the bus and asked to stand up, they had to, according to this law. And it flew in the face of Plessy versus Ferguson. It's clearly not separate but equal. It clearly makes African Americans second-class citizens. And so she refused. She got arrested. And the bus boycott said, all right, we are going to refuse to ride buses, which many of the African Americans are the ones that can't afford their cars and taking public transportation, right? Until they change that law that says African Americans, blacks, do not have to give their seat up to whites. And they got it changed, yeah.
If it happened in Alabama, why is that bus in Detroit?
Because Rosa Parks is a native. I think she's a native of Detroit. I don't know if she was originally born in Detroit or just moved back there afterwards.
She worked for something.
Yeah, but she moved. I know she spent a lot of her time in Detroit.
How old was she when that happened?
I don't know. I think she was in her 30s or 40s, I would believe. She lived pretty recently. She didn't die until all that close ago. 1955. Shoot. I really. All right. Well, there's another case I don't have on my notes that you should probably know. You might have seen it before or heard of it. It's the case of Emmett Till. Have you ever heard of this before? Emmett Till This is 1955. It's EMM. Where do I have it? I want to see how to spell his name. Emmett Till. E-M-M-E-T-T. Emmett Till. T-I-L-L. E-M-M-E-T-T. Emmett Till. He is a young African American. I think he's barely 12 or 13 years old. Yeah, he's a young teenager. And he was, in 1955, he was from Chicago, and he went to visit an uncle in Mississippi, deep south. And he was alleged that he whistled at a white store clerk, and the husband of the store clerk and a buddy basically went to the house he was staying in, pulled him out of his bed in the middle of the night, beat him to a pulp, and left him in a river, and he died. And they found his body a couple days later, and it was horrifically mangled. And the mother had the body sent up to Chicago. And the reason it became such a famous case, because there are many other cases of African Americans being beaten and lynched in the deep South during this time period. The reason it became such a nationwide news story, she had an open casket funeral. And I mean, there's video of it. I don't know if you have, or pictures. If you have the stomach to do so, you could take a look at it. But it brought the face and the sentiments of racism in the South right to the national spotlight. And that's 1955. The next one, we'll just do a couple more in one, is 1957. And this is another very big, important event, big star on it. This is the Little Rock 9 incident. Little Rock, Arkansas. 1957. 1957 is the Little Rock 9. I think we are here. Little Rock, AK, Arkansas. It's the Little Rock 9. And this is a cool story. I really like this story a lot. What happened is, after the Brown versus Board, this group of very brave African American families, 9 families, decide to send their children to register at Little Rock Central High School in Arkansas, a all-white high school. And the governor of the state, named Orville Faubus, you just got to know his last name, F-A-U-B-U-S, Faubus, is the governor of Arkansas. He pledges to send in the Arkansas National Guard, the Arkansas regiment of the National Guard, their troops that they supply to the National Guard. It's like the state guard, essentially, the state militia, essentially. He pledges to activate the Arkansas Guard to prevent these African American children from enrolling at this school. And Eisenhower's going to have none of it, absolutely none of it. The way he pitches it to the public is, it's an issue of federal supremacy. No state governor is going to fly in the face of the Supreme Court decision and threaten to use its state troops to prevent this. So Eisenhower activates the National Guard, right? So he goes above, activates the National Guard, and orders the National Guard to escort, yeah, that's the word I'm looking for, escort these 9 African American children to the school. They all call in sick, every single one of them, call in sick that day. So Eisenhower, not deterred, sends in one of the most famous divisions of the Air Force, the 101st Air Force Division, the 101st Airborne Division. He sends in, not that you have to know this, but this is just the cool part, the 101st Airborne Division. These are the elite personnel of the 101st. So this is like, he's not messing around. They show up, bayonets fixed, guns loaded, and escort these children so that they can enroll in this school. I mean, it is. He basically threatens to take over the whole state of Arkansas if they don't allow these 9. And these if you look up interviews of the Little Rock 9, you can still look up interviews. They're on YouTube. They said they felt very safe. I mean, these 101st Airborne troops, this division, I mean, these are battle-tested troops that are like, they mean business. It's a cool scene. And people were like, Eisenhower? Eisenhower's doing this? Like, no one expected it from him. And it's a turning point. It's a significant event, yeah.
So you like go to the houses and like make sure like since the kid's probably sick, like go to the house and like say like,
No, they transported the kid from doorstep to school step and back to doorstep.
like frequently or just that one day?
No, I think they follow along through the whole a good part of the school year. I think. I don't know. I'd have to look into it. I don't know. I don't remember that.
Eisenhower called in the National Guard.
He called in basically the troops that were serving in the National Guard in that state. See what I'm saying? All right. The National Guard. Say students.